I want to do a brief introduction, okay? I have been doing this for 52 years. This is all I've ever done, 52 years. And I'm really lucky. All three of my degrees are in the field of developmental disabilities and mental health administration. I've worked in all three sectors of our industry. And I don't know if you've thought about it, but we have three sectors. We have a governmental, not-for-profit, and for-profit sector. And then you have like your regional center system, and you could say it's a fourth. It's called quasi-governmental kind of system. And in the governmental system, I was in this, and again, I apologize for doing this, but if I don't, you're going to have a difficult time connecting with me. I was an assistant superintendent of treatment at two very large state psychiatric hospitals. So I had the full range of responsibility from alcohol treatment rehab center, detox program, methadone program for people with heroin addiction. To give you a sense of the size, we had 12,000 outpatients. It was huge. I was also an assistant superintendent of habilitation of a large state-operated developmental center, a place like Lanterman Developmental Center, Agnews, all closed, right? And a horrible place where I was. It was just horrible. And also in the governmental sector, I was an administrator, a director of a place called Northern Indiana Children's Hospital. We supported 60 children who were incredibly medically fragile and with profound intellectual challenges. The children who we supported back then are no longer exist. You will not be serving any of those folks who have these kind of conditions because we basically have eliminated them all. I may talk about it later. And then in the not-for-profit sector, I was an executive director of an ARC, and as you know, the ARC, Bakersfield ARC is helping to sponsor this. Also in the not-for-profit, I was director of continuing education at St. Louis University Medical Center, an assistant professor. I taught mental health administration. And then finally in the for-profit, from 1986 to 1999, I was vice president of operations and chief clinical officer of the second largest IDD provider in the United States. We supported people in 13 states, predominantly people who had very high level of needs coming out of state-operated developmental centers. Then in 1999, we were acquired. As you know, the vast majority of providers in this day are either being acquired, merging, or they are acquiring. You grow or you will die, I promise you, okay? And we were acquired, and as you might assume, officers were not retained. We weren't retained. Don't feel bad for us. We're doing great, okay? And I loved working there. If we weren't acquired, I'd probably still be there, and I wouldn't be here with you today. And so from 1999 till today, my company, Universal Lifestyles. I've always been a trainer and a consultant. That's really important. No matter what administrative role I held over the years, I was always training and consulting with my staff. I am not your typical talking head. This is probably the most important thing I can share with you. I spend 2 to 3 days a week actually coaching on site. So I am in residential environments at 5:30 in the morning when people get up, modeling, prompting, supporting, and celebrating with staff how to improve their skills and how to help people become more independent. And the supervisor is on my hip, and the supervisor's supervisor is on my hip watching me, because training departments do not train staff. Don't be ridiculous, okay? The only thing training departments can basically do is, Heimlich, CPR, assist people on medication, abuse, neglect reporting, some of that stuff. And in order to train a staff, all the training has to emanate, the content of the training emanates from the needs, desires, and wishes of that individual. So you can't expect a training department to know each individual eminently in most organizations. And that's what I do in every environment you can think of. Last week I was in South Dakota all week, and one of my areas of expertise is forensics. People with IDD who have been convicted of rape, pedophilia, pyromania, or murder, almost predominantly men, once in a while a woman. And I was working in one of their forensics programs. And then my other areas of expertise are folks that are very medically fragile, people that can barely roll over and sit up. How do you enhance the quality of their life? Because everything I do is I'm a quality of life enhancer, if you will. Let me start. And I was struggling last night thinking, what's the best way? What should I say to you today to make sure I'm connecting with you? And what I wanted to share with you is that I do a lot of keynotes for large groups. CQL, I don't know if anybody accredited with CQL? Okay, CQL is the largest accreditation, right? Council on Quality and Leadership. And I was doing the keynote in October. and I don't know, maybe 1,000 people in the room, right? Same profile as you guys, you know, frontline supervisors, maybe even some DSPs, executive directors, board members. And I'm on a stage, which I hate stages. I'm on a stage, and usually when you do a keynote, you only got 45 minutes. And I said to the group, if the people you support have a life, if the people you support have a life, raise your hands above your head. Hands above your head. Look around the room. Look around the room. 1,000 people in the room. And I will bet you 995 hands went up. And then I paused. And I said, I wish their life on you and your family. Your children should have that life. They were so upset with me, they were ready to throw me out of there. You do understand what these people were doing, right? They had a very different set of standards with respect to what constitutes a quality of life for they and their loved ones versus the people who they support. We can't do it. The final rule will not allow you to do it. They're going to cut you off at the knees, trust me, okay? Because the people who were raising their hand when I said that, they knew that the vast majority of the people who they support had no control over who they lived with. No control over the provider that supported them. Little to no control over the staff who came into their life and touched them in the most intimate and personal of ways. They knew for those individuals who could provide informed consent, keyword, informed consent for sexual activity, that the vast majority of the individuals they supported were required to take a vow of celibacy in order to receive supports, because the agency will put every barrier, every obstacle they possibly can in front of that person to deny them an opportunity to engage in what most of us would consider appropriate sexual conduct. And by the way, that's for openers. And why did I decide to tell you that? And I'm not making this up. Why did I decide to tell you that? Because that's what the final rule is about. And it's pretty pathetic that CMS had to come up with a policy in order to help assure that people are emancipated, are freed from the kind of craziness our system has been doing for years, okay? Now, having said that, I'm going to give you a mantra. I'm going to ask you to write this down. It'll be 3 times probably only I'm going to ask you to write something down, okay? If you would, please. I'm going to ask that I'm going to do the mantra 3 times. On the 4th time, we're going to all say it together. I'm going to ask that you keep it in front of you. You're going to need it. Here we go. I am a good and caring person, doing the best job I can. Everything I do, because I believe it's right. Somebody taught me how to do it. I have a supervisor who sees me do it. I'm not violating any rules or regulations. I'm going to do it again, and this time a little bit more quickly so you can check the content. I am a good and caring person, doing the best job I can. Everything I do because I believe it's right. Somebody taught me how to do it. I have a supervisor who sees me do it. I'm not violating any rules or regulations. Third time. And I'm going to explain why we're doing this. I'm going to do it regular pace, the fourth time we do it together. I am a good and caring person doing the best job I can. Everything I do because I believe it's right. Somebody taught me how to do it. I have a supervisor who sees me do it. I'm not violating any rules or regulations. Okay, you guys ready to do it with me? You ready? Anybody not ready? Okay, here we go. I am a good and caring person doing the best. Hold it. There's two of you who are not even moving your lips. I know you're thinking they made me come, but I'm not cooperating. Even if you don't say anything, move your lips. Make me think that you're doing something. Okay, just move your lips. Got it? Okay, good. Here we go. I am a good and caring person doing the best job I can. Everything I do because I believe it's right. Somebody taught me how to do it. I have a supervisor who sees me do it. I'm not violating any rules or regulations. If there's anybody who has to say that to themselves over and over again, it is me. I was the guy that designed the timeout rooms and painted the inside red so you wouldn't see the blood. I'm assuming you know what a timeout room is. I was doing what I thought was right, people banging their heads against the inside of the walls trying to get out. I was doing what I thought was right. I was doing what I was paid and trained to do. I was working in collusion with the human rights committees to approve the procedures. I wasn't violating any rules. And I was the guy that designed the mechanical restraints to hold people in place when they were behaving in ways that I didn't want them to behave. We would get wooden office chairs with arms, give them to the maintenance department. They would put steel L brackets on the bottom of each leg, screw the other end of the L bracket down to 3/4-inch pieces of plywood, 4 feet by 4 feet, so the chair wouldn't tip over. We'd get Velcro straps, 18 inches long, 2 inches wide, screw them into the arms, screw them into the legs, and when people were behaving in ways that we didn't want them to behave, we'd put them in the chair. Reviewed, now make sure you get this, reviewed and approved by an interdisciplinary team and made part of a behavior management plan. I was doing what I thought was right. I was doing what I was paid and trained to do. I was doing something I'm still struggling with my feelings. And I was the guy up until a few years ago who was running around the country teaching people how to do takedowns and basket holds and physical restraint when people were behaving in ways that I didn't want them to behave. I was doing what I thought was right. I was doing what I was paid and trained to do. I was doing something. I'm still struggling with my feelings. What's my point? Regret is a difficult prison to escape. I had no one during any of that time that could help me be introspective and understand what in the world that I was doing. And by the way, those people who we were putting in restraint, I now look back and I know who those people are. They were people with autism, going out of their minds on the back wards. No continuity, no consistency in their life. Noise levels that a din, D-I-N, that would drive anybody out of their mind. People in their face, in their space. Don't point your finger at me. We didn't even understand what autism was till like 1971. By the way, case number one, they call him case number one. The first person to ever be diagnosed by autism just died last year. He was, though, 80-some years old. And by the way, they didn't, even though he was diagnosed like in the 1950s, we didn't understand what autism was until the early 70s, okay? Don't put yourself, many of you in this room are very young. The last thing you want to do is look back 10 years from now and say, what in the hell was I thinking? Okay? And as I put this stuff up here and we look at the final rule, some of you are going to say, holy mackerel, is that what I have been doing? Okay, let me go ahead and start. I am doing final rule. If you go to my website, which I hope you do, and you look under course offerings, you'll see scores of different topics that I train on. Everything from assuring individual rights, universal language, abuse, neglect, prevention, you name it. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Everything focused on folks that are medically fragile, courses on transitioning folks out of high school into employment and so forth. This is the latest of all the sessions, and no doubt about it, the single most important session. People sometimes ask me, I'm 77 by the way, people sometimes ask, well, why aren't you retired? When are you going to retire? This is why I'm not retiring. There has been nothing in my 53 years that even comes close to this significance. And then I have people come into the room and say, they never told me that. They never told me that. What? What? The single most significant thing I have ever experienced in my 53 years. There's nothing to, and by the way, I've been involved in a lot of significant things. I've been involved in the closure of all the developmental centers in the state. I'm from Indiana, and a lot of what I do is what's called expanding community capacity. As these developmental centers close, some of these folks have very high levels of need, and we have to expand community capacity in order to support them. So I've been involved in the closure of many developmental centers, and which is significant, but pales in comparison to this final rule. So I'm now, just in California, I'm under contract with, just on this topic, Lanterman Regional Center and also North LA Regional Center. I have a 2-year contract with both just to implement this. My contract here with Kern is actually through Bakersfield ARC. It's a relatively limited contract to 4 days, but theirs are very extensive. And what Lanterman has me doing, you just might be interested in this, they've identified 40 agencies where I'm actually going to go in and coach in those homes to help them implement the final rule, which is really significant because some of these agencies think they're there to care for people. They even have care in their name. I mean, can you imagine what an uphill battle they're going to have, because care is out here, right? Okay, here we go, guys. California, I'm going to give you some background so you understand where we're coming from. When you see the letters CAP, CAP acronym, it stands for Corrective Action Plan. I would suggest you memorize some of this stuff. You need to recognize that your salary and the salaries of the people in your organization come directly from this. Commonly, if I say to somebody, well, where does your salary come from? I don't know. They always want to know when their salary stops, right? They want to know where it came from. But this is where all the dollars come from to provide services and supports in your organization. The state of California is not in compliance. Okay, I will go out of my way to make sure I say when something is an opinion versus a fact. It is a fact. You are out of compliance. Okay, it's an important point. And with the final HCBW rule as of this date. Now maybe something's going to happen and you're going to be in compliance tomorrow. No way. No way. Trying to change California is like turning around the Queen Mary. I mean, just given the size, even given the size of some of the providers in the state, like Easter Seals of Southern California, I mean, my gosh, employ thousands of people. It's huge. Second point, there are only 11 states that claim that they are in compliance. Now, I'm saying the word claim because at this point, CMS has not validated that they are in compliance. They just said we are in compliance. We just want you to know. So, and we'll go to the next step. I don't want to jump forward here. The statewide transition plan terminated in March 17, 2023. Now, I want to go through some little timelines with you. They are critical. The final rule, some people refer to it as the new settings rule, and we'll talk about what the difference is between that, if any, was promulgated, and if that's not a word you're familiar with, please get the words right, promulgated, March 17, 2014. Now remember, this is 2023, so it was developed as a final rule, March 17, 2014. The term final rule is a generic term. All it means is a rule is in the Federal Register, okay? That's all it means. So there are rules having to do with highways, federal highway policies, prison, whatever. that are called the final rule. So that when you hear the term final rule, please understand it does not just apply to the home and community-based waiver final rule. It is a generic term that applies to a lot of different legislation that ends up in the Federal Register. The rule is not final. That's the point. Rules always change. This rule will change, okay? That's my opinion. It will change because rules always change. Now, probably 5 years prior to 2014, so that takes us back to 2009, and I'm giving you an approximation. The Centers on Medicaid, Medicare recognize that the home and community-based waiver system sucked. It was horrible, wasn't doing its thing. People complaining, both advocates, self-advocates, just a lot of different people saying, this thing is so screwed up, we need to fix it. Now, if I ask you, tell me what the word waive and waiver means. If I came and if I pointed to you, could you tell me? Some of you even are waiver people, but sir, you're involved in waiver services. But what I find is the vast majority of people can't even define what the word waiver means. Well, they think it's like saying bye-bye to somebody or something. But this is important. Waive means to waive federal rules and regulations. That's what it means. That's critical to this conversation. You've got to get it. Waive means to waive federal rules and regulations. And as you will see, the original home and community-based waiver, community is important in that term, intended to waive the institutional requirements of Medicaid. So what was waived was the institutional requirements of Medicaid. Historically, and I will put dates up here, you will see it in a moment, you could only obtain Medicaid services in institutional settings, i.e. hospitals, nursing homes, institutional. Then around 1969 through 1971, they added ICF, excuse me the R word, ICFMR, which is now ICFDD. So all of your state institutions in California were funded with ICFDD dollars. Those are institutional requirements. What's that mean? That means everybody has to eat food that comes from a menu that's written by a dietitian. People have to have an annual social services history. At the point of admission, they even, all medical model, right? They use a word like admission. We don't use that kind of words. But they admitted people and they had to have a PT assessment, an OT assessment, a language assessment. So very institutional. Yeah, and every month or every 60 days, depending on the state, there had to be a physician's order to allow you to have that continued level of care. That's exactly right, institutional. And that's the only place you could use Medicaid dollars, was in institutional settings. And then we're going to take a look at how that changed and then what happened. How did we get into this crazy mess, okay? So, back, statewide transition plan terminated March 17, 2023. States had 1 year to submit their original transition plan, 1 year. Okay, so it came out March 17, 2014. They had until March 17, 2050. Submit your plan. Tell us how you're going to implement the final rule. Tell us how you're going to do it. State submitted it. Guess what? California was rejected. They couldn't even get the plan right. Don't feel bad. There was only one state that was accepted. One state, Tennessee. Now that right there should tell you something. The other thing that should tell you something is look at the empty seats in this room. If that doesn't scare you, of what's going on. If I was Kern Regional Center, I'd be pulling my hair out because there are people out there, if they understood what this thing was, they would have been here at 7 o'clock this morning. I'm like dead serious, okay? So people had 1 year to submit their plan. One state initially was approved. That should tell you something. That even though these states, California is not stupid, they have some really smart people. So does Oregon, so does New York. They didn't get it. So they had to go back to the drawing board, resubmitted their plan. Some states have submitted their plan numerous times. It took some states, like South Dakota, 3 years before they could even get their plan approved. That's the initial plan. The final rule, states had 5 years to implement it. So you go from March 2014, March 2019, 5 years. But you know, some states got confused. And you say, well, how could you be confused? 5 years from 2014, not 5 years from the date of approval. Yeah. So if it took 2 years to get it approved, you only got 3 years to get this thing implemented. Are you with me? So you have 5 years from the date of promulgation, which is March 2014. Important. So California submitted a corrective action plan, a CAP. Now, the corrective action plans are submitted. There were 2 major delays. So originally it was supposed to be implemented in what year, Robert? I get confused. I need help, Robert. In what year?
2014.
2014 was the year it was promulgated. What year did it have to be implemented?
2015.
No. What, Carol? What year? What? 2019. You got it. Thank you. 2019. Students never fail, just teachers. I'm not feeling so good right now. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so you're doing great, guys. So California did not meet, and they said they didn't meet it. Okay, there's 11 states that said, well, we did meet the requirements of the plan we submitted. California knew they didn't meet the plans, and there were 2 delays. Obviously, the new settings rule was not implemented in March of 2019. Obviously, it was supposed to be implemented in March of 2023, which is this year. What is that, 4 or 5 months ago, right? That's when it was supposed to be implemented. We got 2 delays out of this deal. And part of the delay was because of COVID. I mean, we couldn't even get people out of their homes in many locations in the country, so staffing issues were abhorrent. And then there was a lot of pressure put on by trade associations throughout the country. Our major trade association, I'm assuming you are members of your major trade association, which is ANCOR, put pressure on saying, hey, there's no way the providers can meet this. So we ended up with 2 delays. So the first, so it was supposed to be 2019, then they delayed it to 2022, and then it got delayed for a year to 2023. Got it? 2 delays. That's it. And then still the states didn't make it yet. So that should be telling you something more. So the feds came back and say, well, we're going to give you an opportunity. This is not a delay. BS. We're going to give you an opportunity to do a corrective action plan. So now you tell us what areas you think you're not meeting your submittal, okay, your transition plan. Transition from the old home and community-based waiver requirements to the new requirements. That's the transition. And tell us what you think you're not meeting in your plan, and tell us when you think you're going to implement it. So California did that. That's the CAP. And as it says here, and everything I am showing you is on DDS website. I'm not sharing anything with you that is public. This has all been available to you. And here's the other point. The feds required that every state have public hearings on this. Every regional center had scores. Kern had, I don't know how many public hearings on this before and after the transition plan was submitted. So every provider agency, every one of you in this room, through Kern, had an opportunity to give your input if you didn't like what was in it. People who were self-advocates, whoever, had a right for input into this. So there's no secrets. Everything has been very transparent. And when you do public hearings, it has to go on the website, and they usually send out an email blast. So everyone should know. So California submitted a corrective action plan through June 30, 2024. Now, what does that tell you? California says we will meet the final rule by June of next year. I'm on camera. Ready? No way, guys. No way. No way. Now when you hear this, because the vast majority of providers don't even understand the concepts behind it. They don't understand what it is, okay? Because we've never had anything like this, and I'll explain that. So what's going to happen if you don't meet the final rule? I was going to put a slide up here, and it fell off, from South Dakota. The state of California has not announced on their website what action they are going to take if you don't meet it. In South Dakota, and feel free to go to the South Dakota website, they will be removing all individuals from those sites, provider sites, that fail to meet it. Do no more referrals and cut off funding. Now that's not a big deal till it's your agency. You know the old adage, nothing wrong with change as long as it doesn't affect me. I hope you understand what South Dakota is doing. and I'll be happy to show you the slide, since we're here for lunch, I'll be happy to show you the slide on my laptop that I use, because every time I'm in a different state, I've been doing this in Florida, Kansas, and so forth, I use the emblems and so forth of that respective state and pull stuff from their website. And in South Dakota, that's it. We're pulling everybody out. That's why many states are bringing in providers from out of state. You notice that's what California is doing, bringing in providers from out of state, because they anticipate a large number of providers will make the decision that they don't want to do this. And you're going to say, what do you mean make the decision? Yeah, it's a decision. Don't tell me it's not. It's a default decision. They're sitting in the passenger seat waiting for somebody to do something. Who's going to do something? No one's going to do anything other than you. And who knows what the state's going to do if you make a decision that you're not going to meet this. I can't tell you. I wish the state would come out and be definitive as to what action they're going to take. If they've made that decision, I don't know what it is. If I were a provider, I would like to know what their decision is. South Dakota, they stated it. It is recognized by some states that it will be necessary to transfer, and this is the thing with South Dakota, waiver recipients from those providers who fail to meet the final rule by the CAP's termination. So I would encourage you to try to find out what the state's plan is, because you only have until June of next year. If I were a provider, trust me, I would say, I want to know. The state is requesting an extension, as I just said, through June 2024 to implement the following regulatory criteria. So these are the points in your state's cap. Okay. Pablo, what's CAP stand for?
Corrective action.
Yes, he's got it. I'm feeling good now. There we go. Corrective action plan. Oh, it was up there on the top. Oh, you son of a gun. Made it easy for him. Okay. Ensuring that individuals have full access to the broader community. So the state of California has recognized that many agencies have continued to knowingly and willfully segregate the people who they support. They have them in facility-based day programs rather than programs without walls. And so your state, and obviously you can't do that. They have to go by, right? So the state said, you have until June, you better be hopping here. Can't come back and say we didn't know it. You knew it from March 2019. Ensuring individuals have opportunities for employment. So what do you got currently in the state of California? Approximately 6 to 7% of all people in the DDS system are employed. 6 to 7%. How if I said, hey, in the state of California, we're going to set up a system that only 6 to 7% of all Latinos can be employed. 6 to 7% of all Jews, 6 to 7% of all African Americans should be in jail by the end of the day. But we set up a system, and don't say it's not the system. Of course it's the system. What are they funding? Day wasting programs where people sit around putting pegs in boards, rings on sticks, beads on strings, mall herding, van therapy, park loitering, mall herding. You think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm there. This is what they've decided to do. This is what the system funds. I can't blame that provider up until now. Just, oh, give me the money. I'll do some mall herding with them. We'll walk around the mall. Under the new settings rule, gone. Ensuring individuals have the option for a private room and or choice of roommate. And again, this is directly out, no editorial liberty, out of DDS. Now that's not a big deal unless you are a provider who supports 6 people in a residence and there's 3 bedrooms in the home. You better be scrambling on that one. How are you going to figure that one out? And then you'll say, boy, I'm really glad Tom's given us 1 year of free consultation because I'll help you figure it out. Well, that's the point of the consultation, is that many people are just going to go, phew. Most people have decided not to ask any questions up until now, okay? And number 4, ensuring an individual has a choice of non-disability specific settings. That is incredible. That's huge. So under the new settings rule, where can people live? This will be a test question. Under the new settings rule, where can people live? Anywhere. That means what? There will be no more placement. Now make sure you got this. And if English is not your primary language, you're going to have a really hard time with this. I'm serious, because I do this all the time, right? There will be no place. Historically, we've done a much better job of finding people for places than places for people. I'm going to do it again. Historically, we've done a much better job of finding people for places than places for people. So you have these people, they call themselves care providers. Right. Hey, Kern, we got an empty bed. You got somebody you can put in it? You think I'm kidding you. Gone. Can't do it anymore. Because now we're not finding people for places. We got to find a place for that person. Where do you want to live? Cabin in the woods? Cottage on the lake? Your mother? Your grandmother? You want to be unhoused? We'll support you on the street. No, I'm not kidding. Once you, okay, now what's that do to licensing? Ooh. When I'm doing the training for North LA, I had like 8 licensing people in the room. And I thought they'd get up and walk out. They didn't. They were great. Because they want to figure this out too. We're all in this together, guys, okay? Any questions so far? So that is the cap for your state, right there. Bottom line. You know what that's supposed to read, right? You all know what the maxim is there? And I use many maxims. Maxims are pithy little phrases that concretize complex concepts, right? The dog has finally caught up with the car. In my opinion, everything that is within the final rule we have wanted to happen forever. There's nothing there that who wouldn't want it to happen, right? And here's the other very interesting point. There is nothing in the final rule that the vast majority of providers are not already doing with some of the people some of the time. Now there's some providers that are don't even have the train on the track, okay? But for the vast majority of providers, there's nothing new. There's nothing new. It's about taking the right thing and doing it with all the people all the time. That's the definition of best practice. Best practice is doing the right thing with all the people all the time. So if I said, is there anyone who you support who's employed? So say, yeah. Well, good. You're doing the right thing. We got one person or volunteering. Good. Now you do that 40 hours a week for all the people and you got it. You're there. I mean, that's it. But remember, you're doing good. Don't stare at her. That's really important. Let her come in. Just let her sit down. Hi, welcome. Okay, so dog is finally caught up with the car. What is very interesting about the final rule that makes it so different than anything else, it lacks total operational definition. That's a really important point. It has no empiricism. It is totally non-empirical. In other words, you can't observe it. Any other rule that any of you have to follow, you have a rule that says internal and external medications have to be separated. They can't be on the same shelf because, and what's that to prevent? Somebody from ingesting an external medication. You have, because policies, rules, and regulations are intended to keep bad things from happening. You have a rule that says water temperature cannot exceed 110 or 112 degrees. What's the purpose of the rule? To keep people from getting scalded. Can you see whether it's 110 or 112? Of course, you stick a thermometer in it and you can see it. You have a rule that says you must do fire drills by shift, by quarter. Why? You want to keep people from burning up in a fire. Can you see whether they did it by shift, by quarter? Yeah, we have a form. We write it down. That is not what this is about. That's why people are pulling their hair out, because there is no operational definition. The final rule is based upon 10 values. Got it? 10 values. And I'm going to put all the values up and we're going to go through them. That's what makes it different from anything else that we have ever experienced, is value-based. Policies, rules, and regulations, and by the way, this will be on the test, keep bad things from happening. Good people cause good things to happen. You're good people. Policies, rules, and regulations keep bad things from happening. Good people cause good things to happen. It's a really important point. It's like the foundation of this whole thing. Now, I'm going to have a very long preface before we get into this final rule. A very long preface here, okay? Because I've tried this training, starting out with the final rule, out of context, and attendees have a very, very difficult time with it. So that's why I've backed this up. Yes, ma'am?
Can you say that again? Policies, rules, and regulations.
Keep bad things from happening. Good people cause good things to happen.
Thank you.
And I really believe, now obviously that's my opinion, but that historically has been, you look at any of the policies. If this room was filled with surveyors, and I train surveyors and reviewers, I train licensing people, I would say, if that's all that was in here were surveyors and reviewers, I would say, you don't care whether people have a life or not. You don't care whether they have a life or not. Well, as surveyors, why? Because surveyors are required under law to follow the regulation. There is no regulation for having a life. It doesn't exist. Why does the vast majority of all the people we support have no life? Because agencies are just following the regulation. That's it. Licensing comes in and says, you're doing a good job. They said, gee, we're doing great. We follow all the rules. That won't help. There is nothing in those rules about having a life. I'm sorry. They're not, and the rules are not deficient. That's an important point. They're not intended to enhance quality of life. What is the purpose of the rule? Can't see your name. Kenny, what's the purpose of the rule?
Pass.
Yesenia, what's the purpose of the rule? Shh, don't yell it out. What's the purpose of the rule?
Enhance quality of life.
What is the purpose of the rule? Okay, somebody raise their hand. What's the purpose of the rule? Go for it. Keep bad things from happening. Come on, guys. You got to get it. I'm going to give you everything I got. I'm going to speak loud. I'm going to talk soft. I'm going to get close. I'm going to stand far away. I want there to be an information transplant. I won't be with you after today. You got it. You got to get it. Those policies, rules, and regulations are intended to keep bad things from happening. Period. That's it. That's all they're good for. They're not deficient. They're not supposed to enhance quality of life. That's not why they're there. Good people cause those things to happen. And then we're going to back up and talk about why this ever came into being. We haven't got there yet, okay? So what is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. Well, I go to these typical day wasting programs, and you ask some of the people who are there, do you like being here? Oh, I like this program. You ask their parents, do you like the program? Oh, it's good. He has no damn life, but it's good. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. Excuse me, remember guys? Yeah, you wouldn't have known this. No texting or yes, you're doing great. Yeah, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And when you sit around and you have no purpose in your life other than, and most of these day programs are like Good Time Charlie programs. They literally turn the program over to the person. What would you like to do today? What would you like to do? That's like asking an Amish child, what's your favorite television program? It's ridiculous. You're asking someone to make a decision about what's going to enhance the quality of their life? It's absurd. That's why they pay us to make those decisions on what enhances. It's like me going to a doctor. Oh, I got a horrible pain in my stomach. They diagnosed an inflamed appendix. And the doctor says, Tom, you have an inflamed appendix and we have to take it out. And this is the procedure we're going to use. And I say to the doctor, well, these are the surgical tools. These are the surgical tools I would like for you to use, and this is the procedure I want you to use. What would the doctor say? Bye. He's the expert. Yeah. So just because people like the current program that they're in does not make it right. Got it? It's an important point. And the paradigm is shifting. There is no way I know to stop this. So we all have a decision. We either can get on the bus or you can be under the bus. It's our decision. I'm hoping that some of you make a decision to drive the bus, is what I hope. So best practice. And as I said, it's basically about doing the right thing with all the people all the time. And your agency, some of you, are already doing the right thing. There are some of you, by the way, who I would say as an example, have people in the kitchen and you assist and support them in cooking their meals. Okay, well, if you're doing that with that one person, why aren't you doing it with the person who has quadriplegia and cerebral palsy and doesn't even know they've gone someplace after they've gotten back? Why are you using their disability as the explanation as to why they can't have a life? That's what those care homes do. You will always note that when you hear the word care in the name of an agency, that's what they do. To care for is to do for, that's sympathy. The men and women who we support do not want nor need our sympathy. To care about is to do with. That's empathy. That's what the final rule mandates. We're not there. Small nuclear detonating device. Everybody under the tables immediately. It's going off. Okay. He's telling me it's time. Thank you very much. You did good. Okay. Whew, that was close. Okay. Let me just finish this slide. So best practice already occurs in your agency. We have to have it occur pervasively, it's a good word, pervasive, and consistently with everybody all the time. Once we get that, we got it. Why am I saying that? Because there's nothing new. There's nothing that I will be sharing with you today that is new to you. You're going to say, people should be employed? Yeah. People should have privacy? There's nothing new. I mean, there's nothing I could possibly tell you. There's nothing in the new rule that is new. What is new is how are you going to make it happen for all the people all the time?